We're diving into the world of medical examiners. It's a profession that, most people only really see on TV shows. And we're lucky enough to have an interview with Dr. Philip Boxo, a Belgian medical examiner with over 30 years of experience.
Yeah, his interview is really fascinating. It gives a very raw and honest look at the work.
Uh,
I think one of the things that really struck me was how he found his calling. It wasn't, something he dreamed of as a kid. He actually kind of stumbled into it.
oh, really?
Yeah, he was doing some anatomy research and needed to use a radiology lab, which happened to be in the medical examiner's office. And witnessing an autopsy firsthand, it really changed his whole trajectory.
Wow, yeah. It's not your typical career path. You'd have to have a certain, mix of curiosity and a pretty strong stomach, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. And Dr. Boxho, he doesn't shy away from the graphic details. Like, he describes removing the skin during an autopsy as peeling a cake. It definitely paints a vivid picture. But he also emphasizes how important speed and precision are during an autopsy. It's not quite like what you see in the movies or TV shows.
Right, right. So, is that just about efficiency then, or is there more to it?
Well, it's about preserving the evidence. The longer a body's open, the higher the risk of contamination. So every minute counts in that situation.
That makes sense. And speaking of evidence, Dr. Boxo, he really stresses how important it is to carefully observe the entire crime scene before even going near the body.
Yeah. He points out that, like rookie investigators, they often make the mistake of rushing straight to the body, which you can understand, but, they might miss vital clues in the surroundings. Something that seems totally insignificant at first could be a key piece of the puzzle later on.
It's like that Sherlock Holmes approach, isn't it? Seeing what everyone else overlooks.
Exactly, yeah.
I can see how that kind of, meticulous observation could be applied in any field, really, whether you're a detective or a scientist, or even just trying to understand a complex problem. It's all about taking in the whole context first. But some of the things that Dr. Boxho finds, well, let's just say they're unexpected. He talks about finding a Christmas ornament
Where?
in the rectum.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but these discoveries, they can actually be really important for investigations. He also mentions finding, like, drug packets hidden in body cavities, which obviously changes your whole understanding of a case.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to be prepared for anything, I guess.
It's a good reminder that there's always more to the story than meets the eye. And even with all his experience, Dr. Boxo admits that he's made mistakes. He emphasizes how crucial it is to perform a full autopsy. Don't jump to conclusions based on what other people have said.
It's a good point. Even in such a scientific field, there's always that human element.
Yeah.
And we can all make errors.
Absolutely. It really underscores the importance of being humble, and continuously learning, even for the most experienced professionals.
Yeah, acknowledging that we can all make mistakes and then striving to learn from them. That's how we ensure that justice is done.
Exactly. It's interesting. Dr. Boxo balances the serious nature of his work with a good sense of humor. He tells a story about a late-night call for a suspected dead body, which turned out to be a discarded kebab spit.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I can only imagine the mix of relief and frustration there.
Right. But it just shows that even in a profession dealing with death, there are moments of absurdity. Life and death, I guess, can be pretty unpredictable.
For sure. And sometimes death is, well, deliberately orchestrated.
Yeah, and Dr. Boxho talks about his expertise in gunshot wounds and how he can often spot staged suicides. For example, he describes a case where a right-handed shooter had the weapon placed in their left hand. It seems like a small detail, but it's crucial.
Yeah, it just highlights the specialized knowledge needed in these cases, understanding, firearm mechanics, ballistics, even the psychology of the crime scene. It's all crucial for making an accurate assessment.
Right. It's a whole other level of investigation. It makes you wonder if anything can really be hidden from someone with Dr. Boxo's experience. He even talks about the idea of the perfect crime. Do you think it's possible?
Well, he believes it's theoretically possible, yeah. And he admits that most medical examiners, himself included, have probably thought about how they would commit an undetectable crime.
Wow. That's a chilling thought. But it raises some interesting questions about the limits of forensic science.
Yeah, it definitely challenges our assumptions about how much we can truly know.
Okay, well, let's dive into something a bit heavier now.
Yeah.
Dr. Boxho shared his list of the top 5 worst ways to die.
Okay.
This is where the interview takes a pretty dark turn. We're looking at the most extreme and terrifying aspects of mortality from someone who's seen it all.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
He starts with being eaten alive by pigs, which is as gruesome as it sounds. He describes how quickly they can devour a body, sometimes even starting while the victim is still alive. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, and even has some chilling parallels to pop culture, like the film Hannibal. Why does he consider this one of the worst ways to go?
I mean, it's a primal fear, right? The loss of control, the vulnerability, the just sheer brutality of it all. It really forces us to confront the reality that death is not always peaceful or quick.
Yeah, that's a good point. And his second worst way to die is burning alive. He describes it as a particularly agonizing death, and he uses historical context to highlight the prolonged suffering that it caused. Burning was, a common form of execution. It was a spectacle of punishment and cruelty.
It's a stark reminder of the darker side of human history, for sure. The capacity for inflicting pain that humans have. Yeah, it's disturbing.
It is. Okay, so number 3 on his list is drowning. He focuses on the sheer terror of it, the panic, the involuntary gasping for air, the desperate struggle against a force that you just can't control. You can almost feel the despair in his description.
Yeah, it's the psychological torment that makes drowning so terrifying, I think. It's not just the physical act of suffocating, but the mental anguish of knowing that you're fighting a losing battle against nature itself.
It's a powerful image. Next up is torture, which of course has a long and brutal history. Dr. Boxo even mentions that there are museums dedicated to the tools and methods of torture. What is it about torture that makes it so uniquely horrific?
Well, torture is about deliberately inflicting pain and suffering, and often for extended periods of time. It's a testament to human cruelty and the desire for power and control over others.
And finally, the number one worst way to die, according to Dr. Boxo, being hit by a train. He uses a particularly vivid detail to illustrate the sheer force involved, finding a detached face at the scene.
Oh, wow. That's an image that's going to stay with me.
Yeah.
It really underscores the violence and the finality of that kind of death, doesn't it? It's not just about dying. It's about the complete destruction of the body. It's a stark reminder of how fragile human life really is.
It is. And on that note, yeah, it's a tough image to shake. It's hard to even imagine that kind of impact. But changing gears a little bit, Dr. Boxo observes some interesting gender differences when it comes to crime. He notes that women tend to use poison more often, while men are generally more, well, brutal in their methods.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It makes you wonder about the reasons behind those patterns. Is it nature or nurture or some combination of both? A
Right.
complex question.
Definitely. He shares a story about a wife who secretly drugged her husband with Valium so she could have an affair.
Right. That's what Dr. Boxer refers to as a crime of passion.
Yeah.
Where intense emotions like jealousy, betrayal, revenge, they drive people to do things they might not otherwise consider.
And sometimes those acts involve, well, some pretty meticulous planning. Dr. Boxho discusses a case where a husband and his wife's lover conspired to kill her. They tried to hide her body in the Belgian Fagnes, a remote area known for its challenging terrain. What's so unique about this area?
Well, the Fagnes is this vast, marshy plateau in eastern Belgium. It's a pretty wild and desolate landscape.
Yeah.
Peat bogs, dense forests. It's not easy to navigate, which is probably why they thought it was the perfect place to get rid of a body.
Right, right. Their plan almost worked. But as Dr. Boxer points out, chance often plays a role in solving crimes. In this case, a man needing to relieve himself stumbled upon the partially submerged body.
Oh, wow. So it's a reminder that even the most carefully laid plans can be disrupted by totally unexpected circumstances. You can never really predict everything when it comes to crime.
Speaking of unexpected, Dr. Boxer talks about these romance scams that are targeting older individuals. He recounts a case involving a Belgian man who died in Africa after marrying a much younger woman.
Yeah, it's awful. These scams, they prey on vulnerable people looking for companionship, often leading to financial exploitation and sometimes even violence. What's really troubling about the case Dr. Boxo describes is that the cause of death, well, it was never really determined.
Yeah, there were suspicions of poisoning, but also the possibility of neglect. The ambiguity surrounding his death is, well, it's unsettling.
Absolutely. It highlights the challenges of investigating deaths that occur across international borders. Different legal systems, cultural differences, language barriers, the difficulty gathering evidence, you can all make it really hard to find out the truth.
Dr. Boxo ends the interview with a thought-provoking statement. When something is too good to be true, it probably is. It's a simple statement, but it's full of wisdom, don't you think?
Yeah, It definitely applies to romance scams, but it goes way beyond that. It's like a call for healthy skepticism, a reminder to look beneath the surface, be wary of anything that seems too perfect or easy.
That seems like a good life lesson in general. So, after this deep dive into the world of a medical examiner, what really stands out to you?
Hmm. The human element, I think.
Yep.
We see all the meticulous science, the forensic details, but
Mm.
it's the stories, the emotions, the impact on the victims and their families. That's what stays with you. Dr. Boxo, he doesn't shy away from the dark side of his work, but he also shows the compassion, the empathy that's needed to do such a difficult job.
I agree. He's incredibly knowledgeable, experienced, but also deeply aware of the weight of his work, the responsibility he holds to seek the truth and give answers. What about you? What struck you most about this deep dive? For me, it's what Dr. Boxo said about finding closure. Even
Right.
discovering a body under such horrific circumstances can be a turning point for the families, right?
Right.
The not knowing, the uncertainty, that can be even more agonizing than the truth.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Certainty, even in death, it offers a kind of release. It lets the grieving process begin. It allows for healing.
It makes sense. It's like a weight lifted. Dr. Boxo, he plays a vital role in that, in
Yeah,
helping families find that closure.
absolutely. He provides answers, even if they're difficult answers.
Yeah. He also shared a really interesting perspective on time, how our perception of it changes in extreme situations. He said that for someone being burned alive or attacked, those final moments, they probably feel like an eternity.
It's a profound thought, isn't it?
Uh,
Our experience of time, it's so subjective. It's shaped by our circumstances, by our mental state. And in moments of extreme fear or pain, our perception of time can really become distorted.
it makes you appreciate the present moment, that's for sure. Dr. Boxo also talked about the differences in how men and women commit crimes.
Hmm.
He's observed that women, they often favor poison, while men tend towards more direct, violent methods.
Hmm. It's interesting. It makes you think about the motivations behind those patterns. Is it biology, societal conditioning, or some complex mix of the two?
Right. It's a big question. He told a story about a wife who secretly drugged her husband with Valium to hide her affair. A classic example of what he called a crime of passion.
Yeah. Strong emotions, they can really cloud judgment
Hmm.
and lead to desperate acts. And the lines between love, betrayal, revenge, well, they can become very blurred.
And sometimes those acts, they involve some unexpected collaborators. Like in that case, Dr. Boxo described where a husband and his wife's lover conspired to murder her. They tried to conceal the body in the Belgian fagnes. They thought its remoteness would protect them.
Right, but as we saw, even the most meticulously planned crimes can be foiled by chance. That random passerby who stumbled upon the body. It's a good reminder that you can't predict everything.
It's fascinating, isn't it? That element of chance. It makes you wonder if a perfect crime can even exist. Before we wrap up, there's one more case I wanted to ask you about. It involved a dinner party, some poisoned couscous, and well, let's just say a very helpful lover.
Ah, yes. The case where the wife's lover, who was also her husband's doctor, supplied the poison. It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it?
It really does. The image of that dinner party with the dimmed lights and the unsuspecting guests, the poisoned dessert being served, it's a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide beneath seemingly ordinary facades.
It speaks to the human capacity for deception, for betrayal, the lengths people will go to for their desires, even if it means taking a life.
This deep dive has been a real journey exploring the complexities of death investigations and the human stories behind them. What's the biggest takeaway you hope listeners will get from our conversation?
Well, I hope it encourages them to question everything, to look beyond the surface and recognize the power of observation, of critical thinking. Dr. Boxo's work shows us that the truth can be elusive, but it's always worth pursuing.
Absolutely. And perhaps this deep dive serves as a reminder of the fragility of life, how unexpected it can be, and the importance of cherishing every moment. Like Dr. Boxo said, when something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Wise words.
They are. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.